There will come a point in your pattern when you're working on circular needles and doing rounds where you have too few stitches to continue knitting comfortably. This will be the case when you're decreasing the crown of a hat, or you might be knitting a pattern that doesn't call for many stitches, socks for example, or little baby booties. So I've decreased our stitches from the previous tutorials, and now it's starting to get uncomfortable to carry on knitting. I'm having to push the needles, and can you see the wire on my circular needles is starting to bend, and I know from experience that will crack, and then eventually I'll end up having to throw them out. So we have two options as to how we can finish our work, and in this video I'm going to show you how we finish on double pointed needles, or DPNs. And if I show you this needle here, you can see that there's no end to the needle, so your stitches can go on one end and then they can come off the other end. So I like to use the needle stoppers just to stop any stitches falling off. And I will preface this video by saying I don't like using DPNs. I find them quite awkward and cumbersome. But as with all things in knitting, it's purely personal preference. I know people that use DPNs to knit beautiful socks. I'm just not very good at it, so please excuse any fumbles or mistakes I make in this video. So I'm going to slip my stitch marker, and then I'm going to divide my work between 3 needles straight from the circular needle. So I'm just knitting those stitches from the circular needle onto the one of the DPN needles. And make sure you also transfer your stitch markers. So try to divide your stitches fairly evenly. You don't have to be completely accurate. So I've got some stitches on one double pointed needle, and I've put ends to stop those stitches sliding off, because as I say, I find it quite awkward. So you can see my working yarn is sitting on one DPN. So I'm holding stitches on this needle. These are stitches I've knitted. And now I'm going to ignore that needle and carry on with a right hand needle and a left hand needle. And again, I've now got stitches sitting on 2 double pointed needles. My working yarn is to the right, and I'm going to carry on knitting with a right needle and a left needle. So I'm here at the last stitch. This is the last stitch left on my circular needles. So we can discard our circular needles now. And here's our work sitting on a triangle of DPNs. As I said, they're not completely equally distributed. So with our 4th DPN, this now becomes our right hand knitting needle, and we hold the stitches to be knitted in our left hand needle, exactly the same as we would with flat stitches. We have stitches that we're waiting to knit in our left hand, stitches that the needle that we knit with is in our right hand. It's exactly the same. So we've got a DPN in our right hand, our working yarn is at the right, slip our stitch marker so we know that red is the beginning of a round. And our blue stitch marker tells us that when we get to 2 stitches before we knit them together. So I'm now knitting the last stitch that's left on our left hand DPN. Just put the stitch marker on. And now this DPN has become free of stitches and now becomes our right hand needle to knit with. So we turn our work so that our working yarn is to the right and the stitches we're knitting are from the left hand needle, and now we knit those stitches. So again, we've knitted the stitches off of this DPN. This now becomes the needle we knit with in our right hand, and we turn our work so that our knitting yarn, our working yarn is on the right hand, and now we knit those stitches, and so on. We just keep whatever stitch doesn't have stitches on is our right hand working needle, and we always knit from a left hand needle with our working yarn to the right.